Hey, it's Jake, aka Cryosion, and welcome to another episode of Cryonaut TV. Today, I'm going to give you 5 reasons why your drums sound bad and what you can do to improve them. Alright, so one of the most important things you can do to make your song sound interesting is have good drums. A lot of times when you first start out, people will have a simple drum pattern like this. And that's okay, but if you want to get a much more interesting sound, I'm going to show you a few techniques to get to something more like this. So number 1 is you're using the same drum samples through the entire song. If you never change your drum samples throughout the song, it can start to get boring. So over here, you'll see that I have a couple different kicks. I have a whole bunch of snares, and we'll get into that for another reason later. Again, a bunch of hats. So you can listen here, all of these kicks are going to sound slightly different. So you'll notice that the first 3 are more synthesized kicks, and then the last 2 are acoustic kick drums that I've picked out from my Seraph recordings over here, which is an awesome sample pack for live drums. So by doing that, I've got only 5 different samples here. You can pick as many as you want and then kind of have your kick drum morph throughout the song. Maybe you just pick, 8 bars of one drum, and then the next 8 is a different one and a different one. You can use filters and automate the whole thing. But if we, let's just solo this track, for example. We'll just play that and then move the kick drum throughout these different sounds so you can see how it will morph as you play. You may need headphones to really hear a lot of those differences, and they are kind of low. So, but if you can't quite hear that on your phone or whatever, try this yourself. Just pick out a few different kicks and just see how they sound differently within your song. Maybe audition different kicks. And then same goes for snares. What you can do is also use a snare for one section and a clap on another. Different hi-hats throughout the song. So use different samples as your song progresses, and that'll give it much more interest. Reason number 2 that your drums are sounding boring or bad is you're not automating anything. This time we're not going to use the kick, but we're going to go over to the hats. And you should be changing the levels throughout the song, but especially if you're going to be layering drums, which we're going to get into a little bit later, you can come in here and change the volume of each individual sample. Right down here is the volume thing. So you can automate the volume and maybe bring one certain sample up or down throughout the track and kind of feature one of your sounds versus another one. But a really good thing to automate as well is the panning. So you can use auto pan, or you can come down here and grab a utility, and then you can change the balance here to left and right. By doing that, you can have, for example, your hi-hats, you can have one of them on the left, one of them on the right, and that way you have different sounds coming to each ear. Or you can use auto pan to make it kind of shift left and right, and that can sound really cool. But drums, especially the more you have, if you use a lot of other percussive sounds or toms or anything like that, they can really fill the spectrum and sound awesome. So use this to your advantage. So real quick, let's stop this one. We'll take a look at these hats. This is my more complicated one. And turn off that. We will start messing with the auto pan just so you can hear it coming out of the different speakers. Again, you're going to want headphones for this or have some good speaker setups. So again, I just brought the amount up to 100% so you can hear it drastically going. That means it's going 100% to left and then 100% to right and back. I personally like it a little bit lower, maybe 30, 40% even. But for the sake of example, we're going to leave it around 50 or 60 for today. So the other thing that you can do is, let's see, which ones do we have? So we'll adjust this one. You need to put the utility in on this particular pad. You can put plugins on each individual pad. So then we will turn this on and make it left. And then go back to this one. Make it right. So now as we play it, you're going to hear one sound is all on the right and then the other one's going to come from the left. So there you go. You can automate the pan or even just move things around to make it more interesting. Just real quick, the other thing that you can automate is like reverb or delay. I'm not going to get into that now because that's a whole other topic, but you can bring in some reverb maybe on your hi-hats and or some delay on some other different things, maybe your snare, and change that throughout the song and it can make it sound really good. Number 3, reason why your drums sound bad, you're not layering samples. If you're only using one sound for your kick or your snare or your hi-hats, there's a good chance that's going to sound boring. Now, depending on which pack you've gotten or whatever, they have some really good ones out there. Maybe you don't need to layer your sounds. But then the trouble you run into is you're just using a sound that you've gotten from somebody else. Who else is using that same sound? And how many other producers are going to make drums that sound exactly like yours? So with a little bit of manipulating, you can get layered sounds that change the entire sound of like your kick, for example. And now it's uniquely yours and you can stand out from everybody else, or at least just not sound the exact same as everybody. So let's go back to my kicks earlier. I have these 2 acoustic kicks and then the 3 synthesized kicks. So we have some really nice top layer there, but they're not very full on the bottom or boomy. So some of these are, especially this one here, has a really big kind of boomy low end, but not as much of a click or top end. So if we go here and move that, and we'll layer those 2 together. Now you need to mess with the volume a little bit and maybe some EQ, but just for the sake of example, let's check this out. And then with just the one bass drum, and add the other one. So you can see how that can really make a huge difference to completely change the kick from the original one you had to add 1 or 2 other different sounds together and make a very different one. One thing that I love to do is layer claps and snares. So let's actually go, we'll just use this one right here. This is one that I did already. We have a clap and a snare. So if we listen to that here together, so I've got a really crisp snare there, and then we'll add the clap in. If we take away the snare, you can hear it kind of has, it seems to be lacking a lot, so then we'll add the snare back in. And it's a lot more full of a sound. So definitely claps and snares work well together, but you can also layer lots of different claps, especially if you have like live recorded ones. They're all going to sound different. So when you layer them and you can space them out a little bit, then you get a much more full sounding clap or a couple different snares, and then those sound even bigger than just the one by itself. The 4th reason that your drums may sound bad is you are using boring rhythms. Like we showed in the first example, if you just have a simple 4 on the floor kick, the 2 and the 4 with your snare or clap or whatever, and then just generic 16th note hi-hats or 8th notes, depending on how fast you want it to go, you're going to get a sound like this. So now if we go in and add a couple other notes, here's what we can come up with. So you can hear we've added some open hi-hats, we've added a little bit more repetitive hi-hats. Our snare, we added another like double hit there, a couple offbeat ones, and then a nice little drum roll type sound here at the end. And the kick is double hitting That alone will help significantly, but then that kind of sounds boring when it's all the same volume. So if we go back to reason number 2, changing the levels will help immensely here. So then if we play the third one again, we have volume changes. So down here at the bottom, you can see the velocity of each note, which in regards to drums, usually will adjust the volume, maybe some other things as well, but more or less you can think of that as the volume of each note. So these, ghost notes are hitting at a much lower velocity, around 36 in this case. So if we solo the kicks, and let's just undo the layering for now, you'll hear the first one's going to hit at about 100. Yep. And then the other ones are going to hit much lower. So it brings a lot more texture to the sound, and it makes it sound much more interesting. As for the snare, ignore all this craziness up here, but you can see again, all the ones that are not on the main beat, we've lowered the velocity a bit, and then we did a nice little volume automation down here. So let's check this one out. So by adjusting that volume, it sounds much more live, like somebody's playing it. It doesn't sound like a machine gun, doesn't sound like robotic anymore. And I love doing things like this here at the end. So just a quick tip on that. You can highlight the notes you want, hold Control, and then you can draw a line, and that automation will change however you want to do it. So it's a nice way to get really even increases in volume for stuff like that. And we'll actually see that here on the hi-hats again. I have the initial hitting at about 100, and then it drops and then increases and drops and increases. And then the open hi-hats are hitting at full volume again. So let's check those out. So that again makes it sound a lot more interesting than just having the same level the whole time. It's always changing. So highly, highly, highly recommend that, especially for hats, and then for snares is really helpful as well. Reason number 5 that your drums probably sound bad is you're using the same patterns through the whole song and it's never changing. Let's just say, for example, you've used all the other tips that I've given you so far, and you have a very complex and interesting drum pattern here, but then you use it for the whole song and it never changes. That's going to sound bad yet again. So what we need to do is play this pattern for maybe section A or the verse, but then change it for the section B or the chorus. Don't have the same, ghost notes here and the same off notes and then the drum roll down at the end. Make a totally different pattern and switch it up between sections. Another good tip is in between, like in a transition between sections right at the end, maybe take out an element. Maybe take out the hats or something, You can always automate that. You can bring it into session view and delete some of those notes and everything. But if you just adjust the elements and how they're playing together, that'll make it sound way more interesting. You can even do things like play the sound like this and then switch it up. So even with just the bare things that I have here, really, really minimalistic, you can already change things up and have it sound interesting. So try doing stuff like that. It'll make a world of difference. So hopefully those 5 things will help you get your drums to stop sounding bad and make them actually sound good and really be a key element, a feature of your song. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'm Jake, aka Cryogen. Definitely go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to see more stuff like this, and let me know in the comments what kind of stuff you'd like to see in the future. And we'll check it out next time. Thanks again.